Arsenal make a major move for Alex Scott as Mikel Arteta targets England's next midfield star. Ladies and gentlemen, a fascinating Arsenal transfer story is beginning to gather serious momentum, and this one could shape the Gunners' midfield for the next decade. Forget the superstar names, forget the blockbuster headlines, because Mikel Arteta and Arsenal's recruitment team may have identified one of the smartest signings of the entire summer transfer window. His name, Alex Scott. At just 22 years of age, the Bournemouth midfielder has become one of the hottest young talents in English football. And according to the latest reports, Arsenal are firmly in the race to sign him. But this won't be easy, because Bournemouth don't want to sell. Manchester United are watching closely. Chelsea remain interested. Tottenham are monitoring the situation. And Arsenal could reportedly be forced to spend somewhere between £60 million and £80 million if they want to convince Bournemouth to part ways with one of their brightest stars. So the big question is, will Arsenal really spend that kind of money? Does Mikel Arteta believe Alex Scott is the missing piece in his midfield? Or will Bournemouth succeed in convincing their young star to stay for another season? Today, we're breaking down everything. We'll explain why Arsenal admire Alex Scott, what Andrea Berta has reportedly been doing behind the scenes, why Bournemouth are refusing to let him go, how Scott would fit into Arteta's tactical system, and whether this transfer could genuinely happen before the window closes. Because this isn't just another transfer rumour. This could become one of the defining Arsenal stories of the summer. Arsenal continue planning for the future. One thing has become very clear under Mikel Arteta. Arsenal never stop planning. Even while competing for Premier League titles, even while challenging in the Champions League, the recruitment department continues searching for players capable of making the squad stronger, not just today, but 5, 6, or even 10 years into the future. That's exactly why Arsenal have built one of Europe's youngest elite squads. Bukayo Saka, William Saliba, Declan Rice, Martin Odegaard. Each signing wasn't simply about the present, each represented an investment in the future. And according to the latest reports, Alex Scott now appears to fit that same philosophy perfectly. Who is Alex Scott? If you've watched Bournemouth over the past season, you'll already understand why so many clubs admire him. But if you haven't, let's explain exactly why Arsenal are so interested. Alex Scott isn't simply another talented English midfielder. He's a complete modern footballer, comfortable receiving possession under pressure, confident driving through midfield. Excellent technically, energetic without the ball, creative in possession, disciplined defensively, and perhaps most importantly, he's constantly improving. Those qualities are incredibly difficult to find, especially in young English players. That's why clubs across Europe have been monitoring his development for months. Arsenal's interest is serious, according to reports from Fabrizio Romano. Arsenal have already begun laying the foundations. Conversations have reportedly taken place with people close to Alex Scott. Meanwhile, Andrea Berta has also reportedly contacted Bournemouth to better understand the conditions required for any potential transfer. Notice something important here. At this stage, reports suggest Arsenal are gathering information, understanding Bournemouth's position, evaluating financial requirements, studying every possible scenario. This isn't yet being reported as a completed negotiation. Instead, it's the early phase of what could become one of the summer's biggest midfield stories, Andrea Berta's influence. Since arriving at Arsenal, Andrea Berta has quickly become one of the most important figures behind the scenes. Supporters often focus on Mikel Arteta, but every successful transfer begins long before managers speak with players. Scouting, data analysis, financial planning, negotiations, long-term strategy. That's where Berta excels. Throughout his career, he's earned a reputation for identifying elite talent before prices become completely unreachable. So when reports suggest Berta is personally involved, supporters immediately pay attention, because historically, he rarely wastes time on players the club doesn't genuinely admire. Bournemouth's position. Of course, Arsenal may admire Alex Scott, but admiration doesn't automatically create a transfer, and Bournemouth have made their position very clear. According to the reports, they do not want to sell him this summer. In fact, their priority is reportedly the complete opposite. The club hopes to convince Scott to sign a brand new long-term contract, one that would secure his future, reward his development, and include a significant release clause. Why? Because Bournemouth believe keeping Alex Scott for at least another season could be enormously valuable. Not only for results on the pitch, but potentially for increasing his transfer value even further. It's a strategy we've seen many ambitious Premier League clubs adopt. Protect your biggest assets. Reward them financially, delay the sale, then negotiate from an even stronger position later. However, football has always worked the same way. Every club says a player isn't for sale until the right offer arrives, and according to current reports, Bournemouth's valuation sits somewhere between £60 million and £80 million. That's a remarkable figure, especially for a player still only 22 years old. But Bournemouth believe they're justified, because elite young English midfielders have become incredibly valuable, especially those already proving themselves in the Premier League. Some supporters immediately ask, £80 million, really? But let's think about today's market. Premier League experience, young age, English nationality, elite technical ability, room for improvement, long contract, European qualification. All those factors dramatically increase value. Bournemouth know they don't need to sell. That immediately strengthens their negotiating position. If Arsenal truly want Alex Scott, they may need to pay close to Bournemouth's asking price, and Bournemouth know it. One major reason Scott's reputation has exploded is Bournemouth's remarkable campaign. The club exceeded expectations. Week after week, they competed against some of England's strongest sides, and Alex Scott became one of the central figures in that success. His performances helped Bournemouth achieve something historic: European qualification. That achievement transformed perceptions. Suddenly, Scott wasn't simply an exciting young player. He became one of the standout midfielders in one of Europe's toughest leagues. That naturally attracted attention, not just from Arsenal, but from almost every major Premier League recruitment department. His club performances haven't gone unnoticed. Reports also suggest England manager Thomas Tuchel has been impressed by Scott's development. Many observers now believe a senior England call-up is becoming increasingly likely. That's another important factor. International recognition almost always increases a player's market value. Because once players establish themselves on the international stage, competition for their signature often becomes even stronger, which is exactly why Arsenal may prefer to act sooner rather than later.
Arsenal launch £80 million midfield ambition. Alex Scott transfer saga takes a major turn. Arsenal's transfer plans are heating up, with Alex Scott emerging as a potential target for Mikel Arteta's midfield rebuild. Reports of a major bid involving the Bournemouth midfielder have sparked plenty of excitement among Gunner supporters. In this news, we explore why Scott could be an ideal fit for Arsenal, how sporting director Andrea Berta could approach the negotiations, Bournemouth's position, and what a potential deal could mean for the club's ambitions. Arsenal's £80 million masterstroke, the Alex Scott transfer story explained. Arsenal could be preparing for another major move in the transfer market as speculation surrounding Bournemouth midfielder Alex Scott continues to attract attention. The talented England international has established himself as one of the Premier League's exciting young midfielders, and his technical ability, versatility, and intelligence could make him an intriguing option for Mikel Arteta. With Arsenal constantly looking for ways to strengthen their squad and compete for the Premier League title and Champions League glory, the club's midfield remains an area where additional quality could make a significant difference. Alex Scott is a player who appears to possess many of the qualities required to succeed in Arteta's demanding tactical system. The big question, however, is whether Arsenal would be prepared to make a huge financial commitment to bring him to the Emirates. Why Alex Scott could be perfect for Mikel Arteta. One of the biggest reasons Scott has attracted attention is his versatility. Although naturally comfortable in midfield, the 22-year-old has demonstrated an ability to operate in different positions and adapt to different tactical demands. For Arsenal, that flexibility could be extremely valuable. Arteta has consistently demanded that his players understand multiple roles. Midfielders are expected to contribute both offensively and defensively, while also possessing the technical ability to maintain possession under pressure. Scott's profile fits many of these requirements. He is comfortable receiving the ball, progressing play, and helping his team move from defense into attack. His energy also allows him to contribute when pressing opponents, something that has become a crucial part of Arsenal's football under Arteta. At Arsenal, Scott would potentially have the opportunity to develop alongside some of the Premier League's finest midfielders. The experience of playing with players such as Declan Rice and Martin Odegaard could also help him take his game to another level. Rather than simply being viewed as another squad player, Scott could potentially become an important part of Arsenal's long-term midfield plans. Andrea Berta could play a key role. The arrival of sporting director Andrea Berta has added another interesting dimension to Arsenal's transfer strategy. Berta is known for his experience in the European transfer market, and his involvement could be crucial if Arsenal decide to pursue Scott seriously. Negotiations for a player of Scott's importance would not necessarily be straightforward. Bournemouth has invested heavily in building a competitive squad, and the club would have little reason to sell one of their key players unless the financial package was considered extremely attractive. This is where Arsenal's negotiation strategy could become important. Instead of immediately agreeing to Bournemouth's demands, Arsenal could explore different structures for a potential deal. The final package could potentially involve an initial transfer fee combined with performance-related bonuses, depending on the circumstances. If reports of an £80 million valuation are accurate, Arsenal would have to carefully consider whether Scott represents the right investment. The club's recruitment team would need to be convinced that his potential and current ability justify such a significant expenditure. Bournemouth's determination to keep their star. From Bournemouth's perspective, the situation is relatively simple. They have no obvious reason to make it easy for Arsenal. Scott is still young, has significant room for development, and could become even more valuable in the future. Bournemouth may therefore be reluctant to entertain anything below their valuation. The Cherries have also demonstrated that they are capable of competing against some of the Premier League's bigger clubs. Losing an important midfielder could weaken their squad, especially if the transfer happens late in the window. This could explain why Bournemouth would be reportedly keen to resist Arsenal's interest. If Arsenal submit a substantial offer, Bournemouth would have to decide whether the financial reward is worth losing one of their most promising players. That decision could become one of the biggest factors in determining whether the transfer progresses. What would Scott bring to Arsenal? If Arsenal were to complete the signing, Scott could offer Arteta another dynamic option in midfield. The Gunners already have a strong midfield group, but competition for places is essential when a team is fighting on multiple fronts. Premier League football, European competition, and domestic cup matches require depth, and injuries can quickly expose weaknesses in a squad. Scott's ability to play different roles could make him particularly useful. He could potentially operate as a deeper midfielder, play in a more advanced position, or provide energy in matches where Arsenal needs greater intensity. His technical quality could also allow him to contribute to Arsenal's possession-based style. Perhaps most importantly, Scott still has considerable potential. Arsenal have shown an interest in players who can develop within Arteta's system, and Scott could fit that long-term recruitment philosophy. The £80 million question? An £80 million transfer would represent a major investment regardless of the player's quality. Arsenal have already demonstrated their willingness to spend significant sums when they believe a player can transform the squad. However, the club must also ensure that every major transfer represents value for money. Scott's age could be one argument in favor of such an investment. At just 22, he has the potential to remain at the highest level for many years. If he continues improving, his value could increase significantly. However, Arsenal would also need to consider whether the money could be better spent strengthening other areas of the squad. The club's recruitment priorities will ultimately depend on Arteta's tactical plans and the players available in the market. If Scott is viewed as a priority target, Arsenal could potentially be prepared to invest heavily. A potential transfer masterstroke. For Arsenal supporters, the idea of Alex Scott joining the club is certainly exciting. The midfielder has the technical qualities, physical energy, and versatility that could make him an excellent addition to Arteta's squad. His Premier League experience also means he wouldn't need a long adaptation period to understand the intensity of English football. Nevertheless, supporters should remain cautious until there is concrete confirmation of a bid or agreement. Transfer rumors can develop rapidly, and reported valuations don't always reflect the actual negotiations between clubs. If Arsenal genuinely decide to pursue Scott, the coming weeks could be fascinating. Berta would have to negotiate with a Bournemouth side determined to protect its interests, while Arsenal would need to decide how far they are willing to go financially. Final thoughts. Arsenal's reported interest in Alex Scott represents the type of transfer that could generate significant excitement around the Emirates. The midfielder's technical qualities, physical energy, and versatility make him an excellent addition to Arteta's squad. His Premier League experience also means he wouldn't need a long adaptation period to understand the intensity of English football. Nevertheless, supporters should remain cautious until there is concrete confirmation of a bid or agreement. Transfer rumors can develop rapidly, and reported valuations don't always reflect the actual negotiations between clubs. If Arsenal genuinely decide to pursue Scott, the coming weeks could be fascinating. Berta would have to negotiate with a Bournemouth side determined to protect its interests, while Arsenal would need to decide how far they are willing to go financially.